Hey guys, tonight we're drifting into the warm velvet night of Egypt, where the air hums with the sound of cicadas and the Nile shimmers like liquid glass under a sliver of moon. Imagine yourself barefoot on the stone steps leading down to the river, the kind of place where you might expect a Netflix film crew to pop out. But no, this is the real deal, and you're standing at the edge of history. The stars overhead are sharp enough to cut paper, the constellations the same ones. Pharaohs once prayed to, hoping the gods would hold back chaos for just one more season. And honestly, if you were actually here back then, you probably wouldn't last the night, heat, crocodiles, and the occasional mosquito squadron. With the ferocity of jet fighters, you wouldn't survive, trust me. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love for you to drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first step along the riverbank, and the smell of wet reeds clings to your skin. The Nile murmurs beside you, slow and deep, like a giant creature breathing. It feels alive, almost aware, and you get the sense that it has seen far more than you ever will. This is where it begins, the twilight of Pharaohs, the slow unraveling of the greatest dynasty the world had ever known. You hear voices, soft, carried on the breeze. A priest chanting in a temple you can't see, calling out to Ra, the sun god, asking him not to abandon Egypt in her fading years. But the words are tired, brittle, like an old song no one believes in anymore. You imagine the gods leaning back, arms crossed, whispering to each other. Maybe it's time to let Rome handle things. A gust of desert wind brushes past, dry as parchment. You glance over your shoulder and catch a glimpse of something strange. An obelisk, half buried in shadow. Its carvings are still sharp, but dust has gathered in the grooves, like wrinkles on an ancient face. Once, this was a beacon of power, a spine connecting heaven and earth. Now, it feels more like a warning sign, forgotten on the roadside of history. The Nile isn't silent, though. You hear splashes, maybe a hippo stirring, maybe just the river shifting its weight. The sound makes your stomach knot. In the darkness, you picture wide eyes blinking just under the surface. Hippos look cute in cartoons, but here, they're basically tanks with teeth. If one decides you're in its space, let's just say your bedtime story ends much sooner. Somewhere in the distance, you catch the faint ring of metal hammer against chisel. A memory, perhaps. You tilt your head and realize it's the echo of pyramid builders, the last generation who dared to carve eternity from stone. These men believed they were shaping forever, yet you're walking through their afterglow, proof that forever has an expiration date. A lantern glows ahead, faint but steady. An old man sits there, wrapped in a rough linen cloak, his face etched deeper than any hieroglyph. He doesn't speak, but his eyes meet yours, and it feels like he's been waiting all night just for you. His hands are scarred, calloused, the kind of hands that once dragged blocks of stone under the sun. Maybe he was a builder, maybe a soldier, maybe just a storyteller, guarding memories so they don't dissolve into the wind. The old man clears his throat, and though his lips don't move, you hear his words, as if they bloom directly inside your head. "You're late," he says. But then again, history is patient. It waits for you, even when empires don't. Somewhere behind you, a jackal yips, a reminder of Anubis, guardian of the dead. You shiver not from the chill, but from the knowledge that every step you take, will draw you deeper into a past that refuses to stay buried. And so it begins. The night of Egypt's fading glory stretches before you, long and winding as the Nile itself. And you're not just listening, you're walking it step by step into the heart of a civilization as it learns how to die. The old man's lantern burns low, and for a moment you wonder if the flame is alive or just pretending, like a candle at a cheap birthday party that keeps going out and relighting itself. He tilts his head toward the horizon, and suddenly you hear it too, the low hum of voices rising out of the darkness, a chorus of devotion floating from a temple hidden beyond the palms. You stand, following the sound, each step pulling you deeper into Egypt's tired heart. You slip past a grove of sycamores, their bark pale in the moonlight, and then the temple reveals itself. Columns loom like stone giants, carved with falcons, cobras, and lotus blossoms, each detail lit by wavering oil lamps. The air is thick with incense, smoky and sweet, like someone spilled an entire bottle of cologne and hoped no one would notice. And there they are, the priests of Ammonius, Osiris, Isis, chanting in voices that shake the air like wind in a hollow reed. You pause at the threshold, unsure whether you're intruding or being summoned. The floor is cool limestone, polished smooth by centuries of bare feet. Gold gleams on the altar, not as brilliant as it once was, more like old jewelry tucked away and forgotten. Yet the priests bow low, swaying with the rhythm of words, believing or pretending that the gods still listen. You feel the vibration of the chant travel through your ribs. The words are ancient, syllables designed to bind chaos, to hold the universe together. And yet, as the echo fades, a hollow silence clings. It's the kind of silence you hear in an empty church long after the congregation has gone home. You realize with a small ache that even the priests doubt their own voices. One priest glances at you. His eyes are rimmed with kohl, but the dark smudges underneath are from sleepless nights, not cosmetics. He mouths something, a prayer or maybe a warning, but you can't make it out. You catch fragments. Are fading. Rome. His gaze is sharp, desperate, as if begging you to carry his words beyond these walls. A statue towers above you. Horus, falcon-headed, carved in black granite. His wings are folded, his beak chipped, but the eyes still gleam in the lamplight. Once, people would have believed Horus watched them with living vision. Now, you wonder if Horus is just stone, heavy and blind, abandoned like a king without subjects. The chant swells, then falters. A priest stumbles, his voice breaking, and the others hesitate before recovering. But the crack remains, obvious, like a glitch in a song loop. Strikes you, faith here is not a river anymore. It's a puddle, shallow, shrinking, evaporating under the heat of time. In that instant, the temple feels less like a place of power and more like a stage. The priests are actors, the gods their absent audience. The incense masks not devotion but fear, the fear of a world without Pharaoh, without divine order. And somewhere deep inside, you hear the whisper. What happens when the gods stop listening? A memory flickers. Pharaoh Akhenaten, the heretic king who worshipped only the Aten, the sun disk. People called him mad, dangerous, cursed. Yet here you are, watching his gamble play out in reverse. The old gods returned after his death, yes, but the cracks never fully healed. Maybe Akhenaten was just ahead of the curve, predicting the day when gods would fade into myth. The chant grows louder again, filling the air with stubborn hope. You look around, at the cracked stone, the weary priests, the trembling flames, and you wonder if the gods ever truly listened, or if humans have always just been talking to themselves in the dark. Then, without warning, the wind rushes through the temple, scattering incense smoke. The flames bend, nearly gutter out. For a heartbeat, the air feels electric, as if something vast and unseen just brushed past you. The priests freeze mid-chant, eyes wide. One drops his censer. Hot coals spill across the floor, and the smell of burning herbs chokes the air. An omen, whispers one priest. Another shakes his head, muttering, "Just the wind." Their arguments sound rehearsed, the kind you repeat to yourself at 3 a.m. when the shadows look too much like monsters. You step back toward the doorway. The stars are brighter outside, the Nile still whispering its eternal song. Behind you, the temple lingers like a dream half remembered. You know one thing for certain, the gods are quieter now, and their silence weighs heavy. As you walk away, your feet stirring dust along the path, you can't help but chuckle softly. The whole scene felt less like revelation and more like an office meeting where no one believes the boss is coming back. Ancient faith reduced to smoke, ritual, and half-hearted chants. Yet you can't shake the image of that sudden gust, the way the flames bent like reeds in a storm. Was it just wind or something else? The path ahead glows faintly under moonlight. The sound of chisels and hammers drifts faintly from beyond the palm groves. Unfinished pyramids waiting in the sand. The voices of builders call to you, weary but determined. You realize it's time to leave the temple whispers behind and walk toward the last echoes of Egypt's stone giants. The sound of hammer against stone grows clearer as you push past the palms. Each strike sharp and metallic, like the ticking of a giant clock. It feels strange, like you've stumbled into the workshop of eternity, but eternity is on its last shift. The sand crunches under your feet, and then you see them, men bent over blocks of limestone, their bodies gleaming with sweat under moonlight, their tools catching sparks of starlight. This isn't the golden age of pyramid building. You can tell right away. The blocks are smaller, the scaffolds creak, and the pyramid rising before you is modest, almost shy compared to the towering monuments of Giza. Still, the workers move with rhythm, pulling ropes, chanting to keep time, their voices low and steady. You realize you're watching the last of a tradition stretching back 2,000 years, the twilight laborers of a dying dream. A foreman barks an order, his voice cracked like the desert floor. He looks exhausted, but there's pride in the way he watches his men drag stone after stone. They use sledges greased with oil, ropes braided tight, and water poured on the sand to make it slick. Ingenious tricks, though you can't help thinking how much easier this would be with a forklift. You almost want to whisper, "Hey, in a couple thousand years they'll have cranes for this." The thought makes you grin and shiver, because they're working as if their sweat alone can keep Egypt immortal. One worker glances up at you, his grin flashing white in the torchlight. He holds up a broken chisel and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "This stone is harder than my mother-in-law." You laugh before you can stop yourself, earning a puzzled look. Humor, it seems, hasn't changed much in 2,000 years. The air smells of crushed rock, sweat, and smoke. You watch as men haul ropes in unison, their muscles taut, veins standing out like etched hieroglyphs. They chant to keep time, a rhythm half like a song, half like a complaint. One verse drifts toward you. Stone upon stone, sweat upon sweat, Pharaoh will live, though we forget. You wonder if they mean it, or if it's just a work song passed down until no one remembers the meaning anymore. The pyramid rises, steeper and narrower. This is no great pyramid. It's more like a stone mountain imitating its older siblings. Yet it carries the same weight of intent, the promise that Pharaoh will outlast death. Nearby, a boy carries water jars, weaving between the workers. He pauses, whispers, "Do you think the gods still care?" The words land like a hammer in your chest. Before you can answer, he's gone. The moon slides higher, silvering the half-built pyramid. You imagine the earlier monuments, towering over the desert, built by armies of workers and priests chanting prayers that rattled the heavens. Now you see only a handful of men, their chants quieter. This is no longer glory. This persistence, stubborn human persistence. A cool breeze brushes past, lifting dust into swirls. For a heartbeat, you see ghostly shapes, shadows of older builders, thousands of them, their outlines flickering like candlelight. They move with precision, their chants a deafening roar. Then the wind shifts and the vision dissolves. The present returns small, weary, fragile. The foreman wipes his brow and gazes at the pyramid. "It will stand," he mutters. "Maybe not forever, but long enough." You realize he knows, everyone here knows, that forever is shrinking. You sit on a discarded block, the stone cool under your fingers. You think about how much effort it takes to build something meant to last, and how easily time can bury it in sand. History will call this the end of pyramid building. But here it's just another night shift. A sudden cry cuts through the rhythm. One of the ropes snaps, sending a block tumbling. Men scatter, torches flare, and the block lands with a thud that shakes the ground. Silence follows, heavy and suffocating. Then, slowly, they regroup, tie new ropes, and keep going. No complaints, no hesitation. You chuckle softly. They're building eternity with ropes that break and chisels that bend. It's like trying to hold back the ocean with duct tape. And yet, there's something noble in it, something achingly human. Historians still argue about these final pyramids. Were they fading traditions or desperate attempts to cling to divine order? Standing here, dust on your skin, the echo of chisels in your ears, you feel the truth. They were both. A little faith, a little fear, a lot of sweat. The night deepens. The workers' chants fade. The pyramid looms behind you, half finished, half forgotten. Ahead, you see the flicker of palace lights on the horizon, where whispers of power slither through marble halls. You rise, brushing dust from your legs, and step toward them. The builders remain behind, their hammers ringing faintly, a heartbeat of stone fading into silence. The glow of torches guides your steps now, pulling you away from the dust of stone, toward the polished corridors of power. The palace rises before you, pale limestone walls gleaming like ivory under the moon. Its columns are carved with lotus and papyrus. But the real life here isn't in the stone. It's in the whispers that scuttle like insects through its halls. You slip inside, your bare feet silent on polished floors, and at once the air changes. Gone is the grit of the quarry. Here it smells of wine, honey, and the faint bite of sweat masked with perfume. The first thing you notice is the laughter. It doesn't sound free. It sounds sharp, like broken glass dressed up as music. A cluster of courtiers lounge on low couches, draped in linen so fine it shimmers. Gold bangles jingle on wrists as they gesture, their words smooth but laced with venom. Every joke has an edge. Every smile hides teeth. A servant hurries past you with a tray of figs and dates, his eyes fixed on the floor. You catch a snatch of conversation. "The general has aligned with Rome." Another voice replies, "Of course he has. Rome is the sun now. Egypt is just a shadow." The laughter that follows is low and dangerous. You press deeper into the hall, the flicker of lamps painting the walls with dancing shadows. Murals of gods and pharaohs look down at you, their painted eyes stern and eternal. Yet even they seem smaller here, dwarfed by the egos of the living. A woman sweeps past you, her robe trailing like water. She leans toward a young noble and whispers, "Careful whom you trust. Even walls have ears." The noble laughs nervously, but his eyes dart around. The palace feels alive, a beast made of silk and stone. Its heartbeat is the shuffle of sandals, the rustle of linen, the hiss of whispers. Its teeth are daggers tucked into belts, poison hidden in wine, rumors sharp enough to kill reputations. You pass a doorway where a group of generals argue, maps scattered across a table. One mutters, "Pharaoh grows weaker by the day. If we wait, Rome won't just knock, they'll walk straight in." Another sneers, "Better Rome's gold than another pharaoh's hunger." And then there's music. A lyre strums, soft and deliberate, pulling your attention to the inner courtyard. Beneath a canopy of woven reeds, the queen sits. She wears pearls that glow like frozen moons, her fingers toying with a goblet of wine. A messenger kneels before her, whispering words that make her grip the goblet tighter. A drop spills down her hand, dark as blood. You feel a tug at your sleeve. A servant girl whispers, "They think the gods are gone, but the gods are watching." Then she disappears into the labyrinth of the palace. You stand alone among statues of past pharaohs, their stone gazes unyielding. You wonder how many betrayals these walls have witnessed, how many daggers drawn just out of sight. The courtiers are still laughing, but now the sound feels like rattling bones. You almost hear the hiss of snakes beneath their words. Intrigue is the true ruler here. You can't help but grin wryly. If you thought family gatherings in the modern world were messy, imagine this. Your uncle isn't just hogging the wine. He's plotting to overthrow you. Historians still debate the scale of palace intrigue. Were the nobles truly this cutthroat, or are the stories exaggerated? Maybe both. But standing here, surrounded by whispers and sharp smiles, you know one thing. Egypt's throne is less a seat of power and more a chair balanced on snakes. And somewhere beyond these walls, a figure approaches who will test that throne like no other. Her name has not yet been spoken tonight, but the air seems to wait for it. Cleopatra. The palace hums with the same nervous energy when the first whispers drift through the corridors. Cleopatra has returned. You don't see her at first, you feel her like the shift in air before a storm, or the way the Nile swells before flood season. Servants hurry faster, nobles smooth their robes, generals glance at each other as if bracing for lightning. She steps into the hall, and the entire palace exhales. Cleopatra. Linen clings to her like mist, the faint scent of lotus oil trailing her presence. She isn't tall, but the way she carries herself makes the columns shrink. The courtiers straighten. The very walls lean in to listen. Her eyes sweep the chamber, sharp and deliberate. They linger on generals, scribes, sycophants, each flinching as though she sees through every secret thought. When her gaze finally brushes you, your skin prickles. Her voice rises, calm and steady. "Egypt will not bow." The words are simple, yet they strike like a drumbeat. Some nod eagerly, others exchange uneasy glances, but no one dares speak against her. A young courtier tries anyway. But Rome is stronger. Surely it is wiser to. He never finishes. Cleopatra cuts him off with a single glance. Silence. The room holds its breath. She moves toward the throne, circling it like a lioness testing her ground, before lowering herself with a grace that feels like a coronation every time. In this moment, Egypt still belongs to her. A servant brings a sealed scroll. Cleopatra breaks it, reads in silence, then sets it aside without a word. The silence that follows is deafening. She speaks again, softer, almost conversational. "Rome watches us. They wait for weakness. Let them wait until their bones turn to dust." The courtiers murmur approval, though their fear is palpable. She rises again. Generals straighten, scribes lower their quills, even statues seem to lean closer. For a moment, you forget that the empire is crumbling. For a moment, you believe her, and yet, in her eyes, a flicker doubt, fear, not of Rome, but of time itself. She knows what you know. The age of pharaohs is ending. A jester tumbles into the hall, bells jingling, juggling figs. The courtiers laugh too loudly, clinging to the distraction like passengers on a sinking ship. Cleopatra shines still. Speaking of alliances, ships prepared, treasures locked away for war. Her words weave hope like linen threads, delicate yet strong. Historians argue endlessly about Cleopatra. Was she a seductress, a strategist, or both? But here you see her as flesh. Clever, fierce, human, carrying a nation on her shoulders. The torches burn low, shadows stretch long. Cleopatra dismisses the court with a gesture. Courtiers scatter, their sandals whispering on stone. She turns toward the darkness, her profile etched in golden lamplight. For the first time tonight, her shoulders sag. She whispers so soft you almost miss it. Egypt will not fade. You want to believe her. But beyond the palace walls, Rome sharpens its knives, and the Nile carries whispers of change. The air outside the palace feels different now. Heavier, tense, like the pause before thunder cracks the sky. You step out into the courtyard, and the Nile seems to move slower, as though even the river senses the weight pressing on Egypt. When you glance westward, you don't see Rome itself, but you feel it, like an immense shadow crawling across the sand, edging closer with every heartbeat. Whispers sweep through the streets of Alexandria. Fishermen mutter of Roman ships crowding the sea like a plague of locusts. Merchants curse taxes that grow steeper to fund armies they may never see. Children chase each other through alleys, pretending to be Roman soldiers, wooden sticks clashing like swords. You laugh at the game until it hits you. This is what they're growing up with. Not the gods of Egypt, not the pyramids, but the looming inevitability of Rome. You wander further, hearing scraps of gossip. Caesar once stood here, one woman brags, as if Rome's touch still clings to the stones. Another spits, muttering, their coins already by more than our own. It's not soldiers yet, it's influence, the kind that seeps into markets, marriages, even the songs sailors sing at dusk. Rome hasn't conquered, not officially, but you realize it doesn't need to. The Nile carries their reach as surely as it carries water. Cleopatra knows it, too. You hear her voice echo in the council chamber. Rome does not conquer lands, it conquers hearts. That is more dangerous. She says it with a bitter laugh, the kind you give when you've spotted the trick, but still can't undo it. The generals talk of war, of ships, of strategies drawn on papyrus maps, but she leans back, fingers tapping the arm of her chair, eyes narrowed not at the maps but at the future. You've seen her boldness before, her fire, but tonight her tone sharpens into steel. We will not kneel. The generals nod, too quickly, like actors reciting lines. You notice their hesitation, the way their eyes flick toward each other, silently weighing whether Egypt has the strength for defiance. In the harbor, you see preparations. Ships being patched, sails dyed with bright colors, soldiers training in the sand. But beside every sign of readiness lies something missing. Armor that doesn't fit, weapons not sharpened, grain stores far too light. You can't help but think of a child standing on tiptoes, puffing their chest, pretending to be taller than they are. Admirable, yes, but Rome? Rome is the real storm. Historians still debate whether Egypt truly had a chance. Was Cleopatra's resistance doomed from the start? Or could clever alliances have shifted the tide? Some say wealth might have bought time. Others argue Rome's hunger was unstoppable, that the Nile was destined to become another vein feeding their empire. You know this much. The debate is easy now, centuries later. Standing here with Roman sails on the horizon feels less like a question and more like an avalanche rolling downhill. The people know it too. A potter mutters, "We are clay in their hands." A farmer kicks at dry soil, whispering, "Even the Nile cannot quench their thirst." Their words cut deeper than any sword. You walk among them, your sandals crunching on stone, and you feel their resignation mixing with fear, like sand sifting into water. That night, you climb the steps of a watchtower overlooking the sea. The air smells of salt, heavy and metallic, and the horizon glimmers with faint lights. Not stars, torches. Ships, dozens, maybe hundreds. Their silhouettes bob against the waves, black teeth gnawing at the edges of Egypt's safety. You grip the stone railing, your palms slick with sweat, as though Rome's gaze itself is crawling across your skin. A guard beside you mutters, "If the gods are watching, they are watching silently." He spits over the side, daring the heavens to answer. You wait, listening for thunder, for some sign that Ra or Isis or Osiris will intervene. Nothing, just the steady slap of waves against Roman hulls. Down below, Alexandria's streets glow with lamplight. Couples walk arm in arm. Vendors sell bread still steaming. Children laugh and chase cats. Life goes on, as though the empire's edge isn't about to crumble. It strikes you how stubborn people can be, how even under the shadow of conquest, they cling to normalcy. You smile at it, a sad, human sort of smile. It reminds you of laughing at bad jokes during an exam. You know disaster's coming, but you laugh anyway. Back in the palace, Cleopatra stands at a balcony, eyes locked on the horizon. Her robes shimmer like moonlight, her face set like carved granite. You realize she isn't watching the ships. She's watching the future being written. And then she whispers, almost too softly to hear, "Let them come." You shiver, because she means it. The day of Actium rises with a sky too clear, too calm, as though the gods are holding their breath. You feel it in your bones as you step onto the shore, the stillness that comes before disaster. The sea stretches endlessly, glittering like molten glass, and upon its sails gather like vultures circling a carcass. Rome's ships, sleek and disciplined, stretch across the horizon. Egypt's fleet waits nearer the coast, sails patched, oars creaking, painted with bright colors that seem almost childish. Against the dark tide ahead, you climb onto the deck of a galley, the wood warm beneath your feet, smelling of tar, sweat, and fear. Soldiers murmur prayers to gods you barely recognize, rubbing charms made of faience, whispering the names of mothers, children, lovers. One young man clutches a clay amulet shaped like a scarab and mutters, "The scarab rises again." His voice shakes. You wonder if he's trying to convince himself more than the gods. Cleopatra's ship gleams brighter than the rest. Draped in purple sails, it looks less like a vessel of war and more like a statement. A floating crown, a declaration of defiance. She stands at its prow, hair braided with gold, eyes fierce, robes catching the wind. Mark Antony is beside her, his face stern, though his eyes dart nervously at the Roman line. You notice instantly, he looks like a man caught between two storms, uncertain which will sink him first. The signal is given. Drums thunder, oars dip, the sea itself seems to lurch forward, and suddenly the quiet morning fractures into chaos. Ships ram ships, wood splintering with sickening cracks. Arrows whistle overhead, some clattering into shields, others finding flesh. Men scream, the water churns red, and the acrid sting of burning pitch stabs your nose. You cling to the railing as a Roman galley slams into an Egyptian one nearby. The collision shudders through your bones, like an earthquake under your feet. Soldiers leap aboard with swords flashing, shields clanging, voices raised in Latin war cries. The Egyptian crew fights back desperately. Spear tips glitter, blood sprays, bodies topple into the sea. You think for a moment of children playing war in Alexandria's alleys, their wooden sticks clashing harmlessly. The memory feels cruel now, absurd. Through the chaos, Cleopatra's ship hangs back, maneuvering with eerie precision. Her eyes dart constantly across the waves, calculating, weighing. She isn't just a queen here. She's a gambler, each move a bet against the inevitable. And then it happens. Her sails catch the wind, snapping loudly, and her ship surges away from the melee. At first, it looks like a tactical shift, a clever repositioning. But no, the angle is wrong. She isn't circling back. She's leaving. You blink, certain you've misread the moment. But the purple sails grow smaller, further from the smoke and clash, further from Antony, further from Egypt's fate. Cleopatra is retreating. You hear a soldier scream, "She flees!" Another curses, dropping his spear. Panic ripples across the Egyptian fleet, discipline unraveling like a frayed rope. Antony hesitates, torn between duty and devotion. For a heartbeat, you think he'll stay, that he'll hold the line. But then his ship pivots, sails filling, chasing Cleopatra into the open sea. You feel the moment Egypt breaks, not with the crash of rams, not with the scream of dying men, but with that single choice. When its leaders turn their backs, an army crumbles. Rome surges forward. Their formations hold steady, relentless, grinding down the now scattered Egyptians. Fires bloom on the waves, oily black smoke smearing the blue sky. The sea becomes a graveyard of broken masts and floating bodies. Your ship rocks violently as a nearby galley bursts into flame, the heat searing your face, the screams echoing in your skull. Historians will argue forever about Cleopatra's retreat. Was it betrayal? A calculated survival? A desperate act of love? Some claim she planned it all along. Others condemn her, saying she abandoned her fleet for selfish passion. You stand in the middle of it, watching men die, and realize the truth is simpler. Choices made in the heat of fear ripple outward until they become history. As the sun sinks, the sea glows with the colors of fire and blood. The Romans tighten their net, strangling the last resistance. Egyptian ships drift aimlessly, their sails shredded, their crews broken. Silence begins to creep back. Not peace, but exhaustion. The hollow quiet after too much screaming. You stumble to the edge of the deck and stare at the horizon. Cleopatra's ship is gone now, vanished into the distance, leaving nothing but smoke and ruin behind. For centuries, people will write of her beauty, her cunning, her downfall. But in this moment, all you see is absence. A queen fleeing the battlefield, and with her, Egypt's last chance of standing against Rome. The water laps gently at the hull, as though mocking the carnage it carries. You press your forehead to the railing, eyes stinging from salt and smoke. The Nile feels far away, like a dream fading. You whisper to yourself, "So this is how empires die. Not with a roar, but with sails turning away." And above the wreckage, the Roman eagle rises, its shadow stretching further across the world. The battlefield fades behind you, but its echoes follow. Splintered ships, drowned cries, purple sails shrinking into memory. By the time you return to Alexandria, something in the air has shifted. It's not just the scent of smoke clinging to sailors' cloaks. It's heavier, stranger, like incense gone sour. You step into a temple courtyard, expecting prayers for victory. Instead, you find silence. Torches flicker against walls carved with gods older than memory. Horus with his falcon eyes, Isis with her open arms, Osiris eternal and green. Their painted faces stare down at you, but the worshippers, they don't kneel like they once did. Some shuffle nervously, glancing over their shoulders as though caught between worlds. Others mutter half-hearted prayers, words tumbling out of habit rather than faith. You realize with a chill, the gods are fading, not because they've died, but because people are turning away. A priest approaches, linen robes frayed at the edges, eyes tired but burning with stubborn light. He grips your arm and whispers, "They have forgotten who keeps the river flowing. They forget the gods who weigh their hearts." His voice trembles, not with age, but with desperation. You hear in it the echo of a man trying to shout against a storm, and then a different sound, a foreign hymn. Roman soldiers in the street chant praises not to Ra, not to Isis, but to their own gods, Jupiter, Mars, Venus. Their voices are confident, full of certainty. Behind them, Greek merchants carry scrolls of new philosophies, Stoics preaching reason, cynics scoffing at old rituals. You overhear a sailor muttering of a strange sect, worshipping a single god, invisible and severe. It's a whisper now, but it clings like burrs to your thoughts. You walk deeper into the temple. Incense still curls lazily in the air. Priests continue their rituals, pouring milk, lighting candles, chanting hymns in cracked voices. But when you look closer, you notice something unsettling. The offerings are fewer. The coins in the bowls have tarnished. Even the statues seem dimmer, as though the gods are starving for attention. Once, the temple echoed with songs so powerful the stone itself trembled. Now, you can hear rats scratching in the walls. Outside, children play by the river. When one falls and scrapes his knee, his mother doesn't pray to Isis. She mutters instead, "The Romans will build better roads. Maybe they'll bring doctors." Her words cut sharper than a blade. In that casual sentence, you hear centuries of devotion crumble. You think back to desert nights, when stars blanketed the sky, and Egyptians whispered to Ra as though he were a neighbor watching over them. You remember the rituals of mummification, the promise of eternity. And yet here, in the shadow of the pyramids, eternity is shrinking. Belief is a currency, and fewer people are paying it. Historians will argue about this shift. Did Rome's conquest break Egypt's faith, or was it already weakening? Some say the gods were too many, too complex for a world craving order. Others argue faith is never destroyed, only transformed. You stand in the temple and feel both arguments hanging in the incense smoke, unresolved. A priest lifts a jar of sacred water, pouring it into a basin. His hands shake. Water splashes onto the floor, soaking into stone. For a moment, it looks like the Nile itself retreating into cracks. He doesn't notice. He keeps chanting, voice raw, eyes glassy. Later, you sit by the riverbank, listening to its endless rush. The Nile doesn't care who rules, doesn't care which gods are praised. It flows as it always has, as it always will. You dip your hand into the current, cool and steady, and wonder if this is the true God. Water, eternal, impartial, indifferent. A thought slips in. Maybe people don't abandon gods because they stop believing in eternity. Maybe they abandon them because eternity doesn't answer back. As the sun sets, the temple bells toll weakly, their sound swallowed by the sea breeze. You lean back, watching stars emerge one by one. Once, they were gods themselves, each with names and stories. Now they're just lights, cold, distant, burning themselves out. And you can't help but think, maybe gods don't fade at all. Maybe it's us who fade, too restless to keep believing in the same face forever. The next morning, you wander far from Alexandria's harbor, away from the noise of merchants and soldiers, into the desert where silence reigns. The sand crunches beneath your sandals, the wind whistles dryly, and in the distance the pyramids rise like broken teeth against the horizon. Once, they were dazzling beacons of eternity. Now, they look weary, their edges softened by centuries, their stones cracked and bleeding dust. You approach a smaller pyramid, one built long after Khufu's Colossus, raised during an age when Egypt still pretended it could rival its past. Its entrance gapes like a mouth, half buried in sand, half forgotten. A local guide offers to show you inside for a coin, and with a shrug, you follow him. The air inside is cooler but heavy, stale with centuries of silence. Your torchlight dances across faded murals. Pharaohs striding proudly, gods towering above them, enemies crushed beneath chariot wheels. The colors are faint, chipped, smudged by time. You trail your fingers over a carving of a king's name, only to find it deliberately chiseled out. Erased, the guide leans close and whispers, "His enemies wanted him forgotten. Perhaps the gods agreed." The deeper you go, the more the tomb feels less like a monument and more like a graveyard of memory. Broken jars litter the floor, their offerings long since looted. The sarcophagus lies open, empty. No mummy rests here, robbers took it centuries ago. You realize with a jolt that eternity has cracks, and through those cracks everything slips. Your torch flickers across a painting of the weighing of the heart. Anubis, jackal-headed, stands poised with scales, a heart on one side, a feather on the other. But the heart is smeared, blurred beyond recognition. The guide shakes his head and says softly, "Even the dead cannot escape forgetting." You pause, listening. For a moment, you think you hear something. A faint rustle like linen brushing stone, a whisper of breath too low to be real. Goosebumps rise along your arms. You tell yourself it's only the wind slipping through cracks in the masonry. Still, you quicken your step. When you emerge into sunlight, the desert feels blinding, harsh, as though it resents your trespass. You squint at the pyramids, realizing how many tombs must be buried beneath the sand. Kings and queens whose names no tongue remembers. Once, their funerals shook the earth. Now, their glory lies beneath your feet, indistinguishable from ordinary rock. Historians debate which pharaohs deserve remembrance and which don't. Some claim greatness lies in monuments that endure. Others say it lingers in the stories people continue to tell. But as you look across the sands, it strikes you. Memory is fickle. One ruler's name etched in every textbook, another's just a smear on a broken wall. That night, you camp near the necropolis. The stars will overhead, sharp and cold. You lie awake, listening to the wind slither through the stones. You imagine the voices of forgotten kings rising with it, faint and brittle. "We built for eternity. Where are you now?" You think back to treasures stripped from tombs, amulets melted for gold, scrolls burned for warmth, bodies torn apart in search of jewels. Eternity wasn't stolen in a single act. It was eroded, piece by piece, until nothing but dust remained. You almost laugh at the irony. Men who thought they could command death ended up more vulnerable to thieves than the poorest farmer buried in the sand. And yet, the pyramids still stand, weary, battered, but standing, like old guardians too stubborn to fall, even when their wards are forgotten. You run your hand along the stone and feel its rough warmth. Against all odds, something lingers. Maybe that's the cruelest truth. You don't decide how you'll be remembered. History does. And history has a short memory even for kings. You close your eyes, hearing the faint rustle again. Or maybe it's just your own heartbeat in the sand silence. Either way, you whisper a name you don't know, offering it to the desert. Just so one forgotten king might be remembered, if only for tonight. By the time you return from the desert into the heart of Alexandria, the city feels louder than ever. After days among tombs and silence, the chatter of markets crashes over you like a wave. You walk into the agora, where voices rise and fall in a dozen languages. Greek, Egyptian, Latin, even a few harsh syllables from faraway traders. The scent is overwhelming. Fish drying in the sun, figs bursting with sugar, spices stinging your nose, sweat thick as a blanket. Here, the fall of Pharaohs doesn't look like broken monuments. It looks like everyday survival. A merchant with skin browned by years on the river calls out, "Dates, sweetest dates." Even Rome can't take sweetness from your mouth. You watch him wink as he hands a bag to a mother balancing a toddler on her hip. A butcher sharpens his knife, sparks spitting as he haggles with a soldier over the price of goat. Somewhere nearby, a musician plucks a lyre, his tune swallowed by the crowd, but still stubbornly cheerful. Children dart between stalls, laughing, their games weaving through donkeys and carts. One boy pretends to be a Roman general, stomping dramatically and declaring, "Pay your taxes." His friends collapse in giggles, rolling in the dust. You can't help but laugh, though you catch the tight smile of his mother, because in her eyes, the joke isn't so funny when tomorrow's bread depends on those taxes. You buy a piece of warm bread from a woman with tired eyes. She tells you her husband once served as a temple scribe, but fewer people come to leave offerings now. "The gods do not feed us," she mutters, handing you the bread. "But the market does." Her voice is sharp, practical, but you hear the grief beneath it, the quiet ache of letting go of something once sacred. As you chew, you overhear two fishermen arguing. One swears the Nile's floods have grown weaker, blaming Roman engineers meddling upstream. The other shakes his head, insisting the gods are angry at Egypt's pride. Their words carry a strange mix of myth and pragmatism, as if belief itself is splitting apart. Later, you sit with a group of dockworkers resting by the harbor. They share watered wine, laughing bitterly about officials demanding bribes. The pharaohs once claimed they were gods. One man says, spitting into the dust, "At least gods didn't empty our pockets this fast." The others laugh, though it's laughter sharp enough to cut. Historians often overlook these voices. The merchants, the farmers, the women carrying jars of water at dawn. But you realize this is where history truly breathes. Empires may rise and fall in palaces and battlefields, yet the weight of decline presses hardest here, in calloused hands and empty stomachs. A man selling clay lamps waves you over. His lamps are simple, unadorned, but his pitch is grand. Light for your home, light for your prayers, light even for your darkest nights. You buy one, running your thumb along the smooth clay, and wonder whose night it will brighten. Will it be lit in joy, in mourning, or simply to keep rats from the grain? You wander until dusk, when the market begins to thin. Merchants pack their goods, carts creak away, stray dogs lick at scraps. A girl hums softly as she sweeps her stall, a tune as old as the river. Her song carries through the air, unbothered by Rome, by taxes, by fading gods. Just a melody against the night. As stars prick the sky, you realize something. The pharaohs may be falling, palaces crumbling, temples fading. But here, among laughter, bargaining, sweat, and bread, life keeps moving. The empire's death throes are loud and dramatic, but the heart of Egypt beats quietly in its people. Maybe that's the truth all conquerors forget. Kingdoms collapse, kings vanish into dust, but the ordinary, selling figs, lighting lamps, singing old songs, endures. And sometimes that's stronger than pyramids. Night falls softer along the river. You drift from the noisy markets and return to the Nile's edge, where the air tastes damp and heavy, tinged with reeds and fish. Moonlight trembles across the water, broken into silver shards by the current. For a moment, it feels like the river is whispering to you, speaking in a language older than pyramids, older than pharaohs, older than even memory. You kneel at the bank, watching the current carry flecks of light like fireflies trapped in the water. The Nile is more than a river. It's Egypt's heartbeat. Without its floods, there would be no bread, no beer, no empire. And yet, like a stubborn old storyteller, the river guards secrets. No one really knows how far it stretches, or where its breath begins in the heart of Africa. Even now, you imagine Roman scouts scratching their heads, following the stream upstream until they vanish into jungles no map dares to mark. As you close your eyes, you imagine the ancients celebrating the inundation, that annual miracle when the Nile overflowed, spilling rich black silt across the fields. Farmers once sang songs to Happy, the blue-skinned god of the flood, thanking him for grain that would keep bellies full through the year. You can almost hear the distant drums, the clapping hands, the laughter of children running barefoot through muddy fields. But the river has moods. Some years it swells too high, drowning homes. Other years it sulks, withholding its gift, leaving cracked earth and empty granaries. You hear an old fisherman mutter nearby, "The river gives, the river takes." He casts his net with a shrug, like a man used to living under a ruler he can't control. What's stranger are the stories the Nile keeps at its bottom. Soldiers marching beside Cleopatra's barges once slipped into its depths. Priests dropped golden amulets in offerings, watching them vanish beneath the ripples. Whole villages swallowed by floods rest quietly in its silt, time's secret museum. Some say crocodiles guard treasures in the reeds, eyes like twin lanterns above the waterline. You glance nervously at the black surface, half expecting to see one glide past. And there's that persistent rumor, the one even Rome can't laugh away, that beneath the Nile, underground channels run like hidden veins, carrying not just water but wisdom. Lost scrolls, forgotten tombs, maybe even a buried temple waiting to rise again. Historians still debate whether such passages exist. You hear your own voice echoing inside your mind, half dream, half truth. But you can't shake the feeling that the Nile keeps more than just fish. You wander along its edge until you find a patch where papyrus sways gently. The stalks hiss against each other in the breeze, like voices passing secrets. You pluck one reed and roll it between your fingers, thinking of the countless scrolls once written on such fragile paper. Entire libraries born from this river's gifts, then lost, burned, forgotten. Dipping your hand into the cool current, you feel silt curl around your skin, soft and grainy like ash. For a moment, it's as if the pharaohs themselves are brushing against you, reduced to dust, flowing endlessly back into the land they once ruled. It's humbling. You could build a pyramid tall enough to scrape the sky, but eventually the Nile will take its share. A frog croaks somewhere, startling you out of the thought. You chuckle, imagine being a pharaoh with armies, temples, and priests, only to be interrupted by a frog. The river doesn't care. Kings come and go, but the frogs keep singing. You stretch out on the bank, eyes heavy as the stars multiply overhead. The Nile murmurs on, a lullaby older than any human voice. You think about all the people who slept to this same sound. Farmers, priests, merchants, slaves, even Cleopatra herself. Different lives, same river. And as you drift into that thought, you realize the Nile isn't just Egypt's past. It's its memory, its witness, its eternal companion. No conqueror, no empire, no fading god can silence it. The river keeps its secrets, but it also keeps its promise. Flowing, forever flowing. The further you walk from the Nile, the more the air changes. The cool dampness clinging to your skin fades, replaced by a dry breath that feels like parchment against your face. Before long, the world around you grows pale, beige, and endless. The desert waits, always the desert. You can almost sense it smirking, patient, as if whispering, "One day, all this will be mine." Sand crunches beneath your sandals. the grains sneaking in no matter how tightly you tie the straps. The heat presses down in waves even though the sun has already dipped. Stones glow faintly, storing the fire of the day, as if the earth itself refuses to let go of its rage. You think about how farmers once pushed the desert back with canals and dikes, claiming precious soil for wheat and barley. But now, with less care and more taxes, you notice how the sands creep forward, swallowing abandoned fields. You can almost imagine the desert chuckling, slow, steady, patient. A lone date palm stands crooked at the edge of the sandy ocean, its fronds rattling like bones. Nearby, you stumble across the ruins of a small village. Mud brick walls half collapsed, a doorway that leads nowhere. A child's clay toy, sun-bleached and cracked, lying in the dust. You pick it up, brushing the sand away, and realize someone's laughter once echoed here. Now silence has won. The desert has always been Egypt's paradox, its shield and its predator. On one hand, it protected tombs for centuries, sealing mummies away from raiders. On the other, it devoured those same tombs, hiding them under dunes until even memory forgot. Historians still argue whether this was nature's cruelty or its mercy. Maybe it's both. Your throat scratches with thirst. You think about ancient remedies, how Egyptians once smeared their lips with animal fat to keep from cracking. You laugh softly at the image of Cleopatra herself, desert wind in her hair, pouting with crocodile fat lip balm. Would she have approved? Probably, if it worked. As you continue, the sand whispers underfoot, dunes rolling like frozen waves. The stars above blaze sharp, unblurred by moisture, each one a cold fire. Bedouins knew how to read these constellations like a map. You, however, are just trying not to get lost. The wind kicks suddenly, sending sand stinging against your cheeks. You pull your cloak tight, but the desert still finds a way inside. That's its favorite trick, always finding a way inside. Off in the distance, you spot something that stops your breath. A toppled obelisk, half buried, its tip sticking up like a tooth from the sand. Once it pointed proudly at the heavens, carved with hieroglyphs singing of power. Now jackals sniff around its base, uninterested in glory, focused only on scraps. You step closer, tracing your fingers along the faded symbols. Some are still sharp, defiant. Others are worn down to nothing. Time doesn't erase evenly, it chooses. The desert teaches you that. Forget fairness, forget balance. One village gone, another spared. One name erased, another carved forever. You wonder if your own footprints, vanishing behind you with every gust, are a preview of what history does. A trick of the wind makes the dune ahead look like a great beast rising, jaws wide. You laugh nervously, telling yourself it's just sand. Still, you imagine pharaohs seeing such shapes and deciding the desert was alive, hungry, divine. Maybe they weren't wrong. Somewhere you hear a low howl, a jackal, or perhaps the ghost of Anubis keeping watch. Either way, you feel strangely comforted. At least someone or something is keeping count of who passes through. Finally, you sit at the crest of a dune, legs sinking into the cool top layer of sand. The horizon stretches endlessly, dark and vast. The Nile feels like another world now, its green banks just a memory. Here, Egypt is stripped bare, reduced to sand and stars. And you realize, staring out at this emptiness, the fall of the pharaohs isn't only about foreign conquest or palace intrigue. It's also about the slow, patient advance of the desert. No armies needed, just silence and time. You lie back, the sand surprisingly soft against your spine, and close your eyes. The desert doesn't care about you, but for a brief moment, it cradles you anyway. When dawn comes, you descend from the dunes and find yourself staring at walls of pale stone streaked with columns, half Greek, half Egyptian. It's a strange sight, as though two worlds collided and decided to share a roof. You realize you've walked into the memory of the Ptolemies, the so-called Greek pharaohs. Their story clings to the very mortar here. Foreign rulers draped in Egyptian crowns, speaking Greek in their palaces, praying in Egyptian temples they barely understood. You picture the first of them, Ptolemy I, a general of Alexander the Great. Imagine following your friend across continents, conquering Persia, standing at the edge of India, and then, whoops, he dies and suddenly you've got yourself a kingdom. Ptolemy didn't just grab the throne, though. He stitched himself into Egypt's fabric, claiming to be pharaoh, commissioning temples in the old style, offering to gods whose names tangled awkwardly on his Greek tongue. As you wander through the ruins, the duality is everywhere. Reliefs show Horus and Isis side by side with Zeus and Dionysus. Columns rise in Greek proportions, but the walls are alive with hieroglyphs. It's like a cultural mashup centuries before fusion cuisine. Some Egyptians embraced it, others grumbled. You overhear, in your mind's ear, an old priest muttering, "Pharaoh should speak with the gods, not with a foreign accent." And yet, the Greek pharaohs weren't entirely imposters. They poured wealth into temples, rebuilt shrines, and even revived rituals that native dynasties had neglected. The irony bites. Sometimes conquerors cling harder to tradition than those born into it. Historians still debate whether this was respect or political theater. Maybe both. The strangest part? The Ptolemies married one another, brother to sister, niece to uncle, like a family tree tangled into knots. Their logic was simple. Keep the bloodline pure, keep the throne in the family. Your stomach churns at the thought. Imagine family dinners. Cleopatra, of course, became the brightest star of this dynasty, but even she carried the weight of this complex inheritance. Greek by blood, Egyptian by destiny. Walking deeper into the ruins, you find carvings of Berenice II, a queen whose lock of hair, legend says, was sacrificed to secure her husband's victory. The gods, apparently touched, lifted her curls into the sky, what astronomers still call the constellation Coma Berenices. A queen's haircut turned into a cosmic billboard. You smile at the absurdity. Ancient propaganda, but written in starlight. You pause at a crumbled statue where the nose is long gone. Was it deliberately struck off? You've seen enough damaged statues by now to wonder. Maybe it was vandalism, maybe the desert winds, or maybe time itself wanted to erase a half-foreign ruler's face. The debate among scholars continues endlessly. Still, for all their oddities, the Ptolemies gave Egypt something dazzling. Alexandria, a jewel at the world's edge. Here scholars debated, mathematicians scribbled formulas, poets spun epics. The Ptolemies wanted not just power but immortality through knowledge. And yet, you can't help but notice the irony. While they filled libraries with scrolls, the sands outside the city kept swallowing whole villages. Two Egypts coexisted, one glittering in marble, the other gasping for water. You sit on a fallen column, letting your hand rest on the cool stone. It strikes you that the Greek pharaohs were both intruders and caretakers, destroyers and preservers. Their legacy isn't clean. It's tangled, hybrid, messy. Like the ruins themselves, Greek columns, Egyptian walls, both broken, both still standing. A warm breeze shifts, carrying the faintest echo of laughter. You imagine Cleopatra's court here, voices speaking in Greek, servants replying in Egyptian, scrolls being unrolled, incense curling into the air. For a heartbeat, the ruins live again. And then the wind dies, and silence reclaims it all. You rise, brushing dust from your legs, and take one last look. These were the pharaohs who weren't born Egyptian, yet ruled as if they had always belonged. They are proof that history is never simple. It is always layered, complicated, human. And as you leave the ruins behind, you can't help but whisper to yourself, even foreign kings can become pharaohs, if the Nile lets them. The temple rises before you, its pylons still tall though chipped, its reliefs faded but not gone. You step into the shadow of stone, where the air cools and the smell of incense lingers, though faintly like a memory. Here, the priests keep their rituals alive, voices echoing in chambers where few worshippers come anymore. Their chants bounce against the walls, hollow, determined, like a fire being coaxed from dying embers. You watch one priest in a leopard skin robe pour libations over an altar, the liquid splashing across carvings of Horus. His lips move quickly, reciting hymns older than pyramids, words that once carried power. Now, they sound like echoes recited for an audience that no longer listens. The offering bowls are smaller, the incense cheaper, the gold thinner. You feel the strain in his movements, as though he is not just serving gods but fighting against time itself. The truth whispers from the corners. The people are drifting away. Farmers still offer prayers when floods come, but fewer walk to the temples. Some whisper Roman gods' names, others follow strange Eastern cults. One fisherman you overheard at the Nile spoke of a single god, invisible, who listens without incense or sacrifice. You imagine how such an idea must shake the priests to their core. Still, they cling. One priest leads you into a side chamber where scrolls are stacked high, dust rising as he unrolls a brittle papyrus. He shows you diagrams of stars, rituals for summoning protection, recipes for healing potions. He tells you about a salve made from honey and copper, used to treat wounds. Our knowledge is eternal, he insists, eyes flashing. Yet you notice how his hands tremble, perhaps from age, perhaps from fear. You step into the hypostyle hall, massive columns painted in colors long faded. The ceiling is dark with soot from lamps burned for centuries. Above you, faint carvings of stars linger, the night sky etched in stone. Once, worshippers would lie here, staring upward, believing they touched eternity. Tonight, the hall is empty. Your footsteps echo louder than the chants. There's something eerie about this persistence, like actors on a stage where the audience has left but the play goes on. A priest brushes past you, carrying a tray of lotus flowers, wilted from the heat. He places them before a statue of Osiris, adjusting them carefully, as if the god might notice the difference. You want to tell him, it doesn't matter, but maybe it does. Maybe the ritual is the only thing keeping both priest and god alive. At the rear of the temple, you find a sealed door carved with warnings, curses promising torment to anyone who dares open it. The stone around it crumbles, and you see where sand has already pushed inside. Time doesn't fear curses. The desert is its own god. A thought strikes you. Perhaps the priests are less worried about Rome than about this slow erosion, this creeping irrelevance. Rome conquers with legions, but silence conquers with time. And silence is winning here. As you leave the temple, a gust of wind scatters sand across the floor, covering footprints in seconds. The chants fade behind you, swallowed by the desert. For a moment, you feel as though you've just witnessed the gods themselves withdrawing, step by step, retreating into the shadows. You pause at the threshold, looking back once more at the flickering lamps. They burn small and stubborn, flames trembling in the dark. And you wonder if that is what faith always is, tiny fires against an infinite night. The road leads you back toward the sea, where the smell of salt sharpens the air and gulls cry overhead like quarrelsome spirits. Before long, towers rise on the horizon, white against the blue, and you know you've reached Alexandria, the beating heart of knowledge, trade, and ambition. Even as Egypt falters, Alexandria burns bright, a flame that refuses to dim. You enter through bustling streets, wider than those of old Thebes, lined with marble colonnades. Merchants shout in Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, Latin. Perfume mixes with fish guts, scrolls with spices. Somewhere a camel refuses to move, blocking traffic like the ancient version of a delivery truck double parked. You grin, realizing not even the glory of Alexandria escapes such annoyances. And then the great marvel itself, the library. Its colonnades rise like a temple to thought, its doors flung wide to those who seek wisdom. You step inside, and silence wraps you. Not empty silence, but the dense hush of minds at work. Thousands of scrolls line the walls, papyrus crackling under careful hands. Scholars debate geometry in one corner, while in another, physicians discuss anatomy using words sharp as scalpels. It smells of ink, dust, and ambition. You wander past tables stacked with texts from India, Babylon, Greece. Imagine for a moment that this is the internet of its age, except instead of memes and cat videos, it's stuffed with the collected knowledge of the world. Well, probably some bad poetry too. But hey, every age has its filler content. One scribe proudly explains how ships docking in the harbor are asked to surrender any texts on board, copied quickly and returned, or sometimes not returned at all. Alexandria collects knowledge the way a miser collects gold. The flame here is hunger, the hunger to know everything. But fire, as you know, is fickle. Stories already swirl of scrolls lost to accidents, to neglect, to war. Some say Julius Caesar's siege years ago burned part of this treasure. Others insist the real destruction came later. Historians still debate who lit the match, but the truth is simpler. Fire doesn't care who strikes the spark. What matters is what vanishes in smoke. You pause by a group of philosophers arguing whether the earth circles the sun or stands still at the center. Their voices rise, each certain, each unwilling to bend. You smile, because you know centuries later schoolchildren will memorize the answer, never realizing the heat of these debates. Knowledge always feels inevitable once it's won. Not far from the library stands the lighthouse of Pharaohs, one of the wonders of the world. Its beacon sweeps across the night, guiding ships into harbor, its flame magnified by bronze mirrors. You stand at the base, craning your neck until you're dizzy, imagining sailors seeing this fire after months at sea, tears in their eyes at the promise of land. Fire again, the kind that saves instead of destroys. And yet, you sense fragility here too. Alexandria burns bright, but brightness attracts shadows. Already Rome eyes it greedily. Already envy stirs beyond its walls. The flame that lights knowledge can also blind rulers into arrogance. You wonder if the Ptolemies believe the city can shield them from decline, as though scrolls and lighthouses alone could keep the desert and legions at bay. As the sun sets, you sit near the harbor, watching the lighthouse beam cut through mist. Ships sway gently, their masts creaking like trees in the wind. A boy beside you sells roasted nuts, the shells crunching pleasantly as you chew. Ordinary life humming along in the shadow of greatness. That's Alexandria. Both sublime and mundane, scrolls and snacks side by side. When darkness deepens, the library windows glow with lamplight, silhouettes of scholars flickering against the walls. For now, the flame holds steady. You whisper a small hope that it will last forever, though you already know it won't. But still, you let the thought linger because sometimes hope itself is a kind of flame. By the time you leave the glittering halls of Alexandria, you notice something less radiant. The weary faces of the people bent under burdens you can't quite ignore. Taxes. The very word feels heavy, like sandbags tied to every step. You follow a line of farmers trudging toward a government office, baskets of grain balanced on shoulders, each kernel a coin in the Pharaohs' shrinking treasury. The air inside is thick with dust and tension. Scribes sit at long wooden tables, quills scratching as they tally offerings. A tax collector in crisp linen robe counts slowly, savoring the power in every stroke of his pen. He doesn't see bread or sweat or hunger, just numbers. A farmer ahead of you argues, his voice trembling. The Nile flooded poorly this year, the harvest thin. The collector barely glances up, just gestures to soldiers waiting at the door. The farmer's protests wither as he hands over his last sack of barley. You can feel the resentment crackling like a storm. Taxes here aren't just numbers. They are the difference between a family eating bread or chewing on bitterness. One man mutters under his breath, "The Pharaoh is no god. Gods don't steal from the hungry." His neighbor hushes him quickly, but the words hang in the air like smoke. In the streets outside, you see the effects. A mother waters down her stew until it's little more than flavored broth. Children play with pebbles because toys are too costly. Merchants complain of empty purses, while Roman soldiers strut by, armor shining, pockets jingling with coin. The imbalance is obvious. The few grow fat while the many grow thin. Historians often argue whether excessive taxation was a nail in Egypt's coffin or merely a symptom of its decline. To you, walking through these alleys, it feels like both. Taxes build temples, libraries, and lighthouses, yes, but they also carve hollows into stomachs, into faith, into loyalty. And loyalty, once drained, is almost impossible to refill. A man selling onions leans toward you, whispering about secret markets hidden at night, where farmers trade away from the watchful eyes of officials. He smirks, handing you a bulb fragrant with earth. Even Rome can't tax shadows. You laugh, but it's the kind of laugh that tastes bitter. Desperation breeds cleverness and danger. Later, at a tavern, dockworkers nurse mugs of sour beer, grumbling. One slams his fist on the table, froth splashing. We carry the empire on our backs, but the empire only digs deeper into our pockets. Another nods, adding, "Bread grows thinner, taxes grow heavier. Which will break first, our backs or the Pharaoh's crown?" Their laughter is sharp, the kind of laughter that comes when anger is safer wrapped in jokes. You realize the weight of taxes is more than economic, it's emotional. It presses into minds, whispers into prayers, gnaws at the idea of Pharaoh's divinity. A ruler can be godlike only if the people believe it, but belief is fragile when your stomach is empty. As night falls, you walk past a granary, soldiers guarding its gates. Inside, piles of grain wait in the dark while children nearby go to bed hungry. The hypocrisy makes your chest ache. You imagine the gods watching, silent. Do they frown or simply shrug, tired of being ignored? A cold breeze rattles through the streets, carrying dust and mutters of discontent. You feel it settling, a quiet rebellion seated in every corner. Rome doesn't need to conquer with swords when taxes erode trust grain by grain. You lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of your lodging, listening to the city's restless murmurs. The weight of taxes isn't just crushing Egypt's purse, it's crushing its soul. And a broken soul is harder to mend than broken stone. The city seems quieter tonight, but the silence feels wrong. Thick, watchful, as if someone is holding their breath. You walk narrow alleys where torchlight flickers against plaster walls, and every shadow looks longer than it should. Whispers coil through the dark. Betrayals, plots, daggers waiting to flash. Egypt's throne isn't just under siege by Rome or the desert. It's collapsing inward, gnawed by assassins in the shadows. In a courtyard, you overhear two servants gossiping while they sweep. One leans close, voice trembling. "Did you hear? The governor of Thebes was poisoned at dinner." The other shrugs, unfazed. At least he didn't choke on taxes like the rest of us. They laugh nervously, glancing around, then lower their heads. Even jokes here carry knives. Inside the palace, paranoia hums like a swarm of flies. Guards pace faster, hands never leaving the hilts of their swords. Courtiers smile too wide, their words dripping with honey but edged with venom. Behind curtains, voices hiss about alliances, betrayals, secret promises. It feels like a game of Senate, pieces shifting across a board no one can fully see. Except the final square is always death. You imagine one Ptolemy brother eyeing another across a banquet, the aroma of roasted goose and spiced wine masking the fear. Hands lift goblets in toast, but each sip could be the last. Some kings are murdered in their baths, others smothered in sleep. Cleopatra herself learned early that trust is a luxury too costly for royalty. Historians still debate who killed whom, the details lost in rumor and propaganda. Was it a rival sibling? An ambitious general? A foreign hand greased with Roman coin? The records blur, but the pattern is clear. Egypt bleeds from within long before Roman blades arrive. In the darker streets, assassins are no longer whispered myths. You hear the scrape of sandals behind you, quick, then gone. A shadow flits across a rooftop. A door creaks open just enough for an eye to glint, then shuts again. The city breathes danger. You walk faster, heart quickening, though you try to laugh it off, as if laughter could stop a knife already sharpened with your name on it. One night, in a tavern, you share bread with a soldier whose loyalty is uncertain. He tells you of a captain strangled with his own belt, body dumped in the harbor. His voice drops to a whisper. No one serves Pharaoh. We serve survival. His eyes dart to the doorway, as though expecting ears to sprout from the shadows. You realize assassination isn't just about killing bodies. It's about killing trust. Every handshake feels slippery, every smile crooked. Leaders fall, but so does confidence, faith, stability. It's like termites hollowing wood. The palace may gleam outside, but inside, it's already powder. Still, amid the fear, life carries on. Bakers knead dough at dawn. Children chase each other in the streets. Lovers steal kisses in alleyways. That's Egypt's stubborn defiance, living as if the knives don't exist. But even laughter sounds different here, tinged with nervousness, as though everyone knows joy might be short-lived. By midnight, you sit on a rooftop, staring at the stars. From above, the city looks calm, lanterns glowing, waves lapping at the harbor. But beneath that calm is a heartbeat too fast, too uneven. Egypt's rulers fight each other in the dark, and every stab in the night weakens the crown just a little more. You whisper to yourself, half in dread, half in awe. Empires fall not only to enemies outside, but to daggers drawn inside their own walls. The air in Alexandria is heavier than usual, as if the sea itself is holding back a storm. You step into Cleopatra's palace on what you realize is her final night, and even the marble floors seem to tremble under the weight of endings. Torches flicker against golden walls, shadows stretching long, as though reluctant to leave her side. The queen's presence lingers everywhere. Perfumed halls, jeweled thrones, tapestries of Nile gods. But tonight it feels like memory rather than power. You find her in her private chamber, not draped in splendor, but sitting quietly near a window, the Mediterranean dark and endless beyond. She looks smaller than the legend, wrapped in linen, hair braided simply. A tray of figs rests at her side, and you already know one is rumored to hide a serpent. The ASP, smooth and silent, coiled like destiny in a basket. Her hand brushes the fruit, then pulls back, hesitating. She turns her gaze outward, speaking softly. Rome doesn't take queens, it parades them. Her voice cracks, the weight of humiliation sharper than any blade. She would rather write her own ending than let Octavian stage it. Historians still argue about what truly happened. The ASP hidden in figs, poison on a hairpin, or a draft slipped into wine. But as you watch her fingers hover over the tray, you feel the truth isn't in the method, but in the choice. Death is her last act of sovereignty. Around her, loyal handmaidens stand silent, eyes shimmering with tears. One clasps Cleopatra's arm, whispering, "There may still be a way," but the queen shakes her head. "The way is mine to choose." Even now, she radiates control, fragile, yet unbroken. The room is hushed, broken only by the sigh of waves outside. She raises the fig, holds it a moment as though toasting herself, then lowers it slowly, steady. Her face softens, almost peaceful. You can't help but think how strange it is. This woman who faced Caesar, who defied Rome, who wielded Egypt like a blade, now choosing stillness over spectacle. And yet, there's bitter irony. Rome will still tell her story. Twist it, mold it, dress it in their theater. But this moment belongs only to her. You feel privileged, unsettled, like witnessing a candle snuffed before its wax is spent. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze mirror. For a heartbeat, Cleopatra's eyes meet yours there, tired but fierce. It feels as if she's asking you to carry the weight of remembering. Not the myths, not the rumors, but the choice. Outside, the city sleeps fitfully, unaware its queen is slipping into legend. Tomorrow, soldiers will march, Octavian will gloat, Rome will expand. But tonight, here, you feel the hush of history folding inward, a queen vanishing not with chains, but with silence. You lie back, eyes burning, knowing that when dawn comes, Egypt will no longer belong to itself. The Nile will still flow, the pyramids will still rise, but the crown will rest in foreign hands. And somewhere, in the quiet chamber of her palace, the queen has written her final line. Morning comes, but it doesn't feel like any other morning. The city stirs reluctantly, as though every street and every stone already knows. Cleopatra is gone. Egypt is finished. The harbor, once alive with Egyptian sails, now bristles with Roman galleys. Their black hulls and crimson standards blot out the horizon like a tide of iron. Soldiers march through the streets in perfect rhythm, sandals striking stone like drums of inevitability. The people watch in silence. No cheers, no resistance, only the heavy resignation of a nation too weary to fight. You pass the palace gates, now guarded not by Egyptians, but by Roman centurions, armor gleaming under the sun. Inside, Octavian strides with the cold confidence of a man who believes history itself has bowed to him. He surveys the hall where pharaohs once ruled, weighing which parts of Egypt will serve Rome best. Its gold, its grain, its gods, its people. In the marketplace, merchants bow deeply, voices trembling as they hail Rome in Latin. Behind their smiles, jaws clench, eyes dart to the ground. Even the children, usually loud with play, move quietly today, as if afraid their laughter might offend the conquerors. The Nile flows on, indifferent. Barges heavy with grain drift northward, heading for Rome's storerooms. You can almost hear the sighs of the farmers who tilled that earth, knowing their harvest won't return as bread to their tables, but as banquets for men across the sea. Historians debate whether Cleopatra's death was the true end or merely a symbol of Egypt's collapse. But walking through these streets, you don't need a historian. You feel it in the silence, in the broken posture of the city. The pharaohs are gone. The gods are quiet. The crown has passed not through bloodline, but conquest. Still, Rome isn't openly cruel, at least not today. Temples remain, priests still chant, though fewer devotees gather. Festivals are held, but the music sounds strained. Songs sung through clenched teeth. Rome prefers Egypt alive, but subdued. A jewel in its crown, not ashes on the wind. That night, you sit by the harbor, listening to waves slap against Roman ships. The stars above are the same ones pharaohs prayed to, the same ones priests charted in their scrolls. Yet somehow they feel farther away, dimmer, as if they too have been annexed by Rome. You close your eyes and remember the whispering reeds of the Nile, the grandeur of pyramids, the laughter of marketplaces before shadows grew heavy. All of it feels like a dream slipping away. Rome claims the Nile not only by steel and treaty, but by rewriting its story. And you, sitting there with the salt air stinging your face, realize you are watching the curtain fall on one of the greatest stages in history. Egypt hasn't vanished, but it has been swallowed. Its voice quieter now, its rhythm hidden beneath Rome's drumbeat. The city sleeps uneasily, torches glowing against foreign armor. Somewhere deep inside, you can feel Egypt still breathing, but softly, as though afraid of being heard. The nights after Rome's triumph are quieter, as if Egypt itself has learned to whisper. You wander the banks of the Nile, and though soldiers still patrol the streets and foreign banners flap in the wind, the river flows the same way it always has. This current carries both memory and forgetting, and you feel caught somewhere between. You step past the temples, their stone walls glowing faintly under moonlight. The gods are still here, Horus, Isis, Osiris, chiseled into the walls, their forms eternal. But their voices are muted, prayers fewer, offerings smaller. Rome does not forbid them, but Rome overshadows them, folding Egypt into its empire the way a mighty ocean swallows rivers. And yet, echoes remain. You see them in the wrinkles of a farmer's hands as he lifts water from the Nile, in the smile of a child tracing hieroglyphs in the dirt, in the stubborn way a priest lights incense each dawn. Empires may conquer, crowns may change hands, but culture clings like desert sand. It lingers, it seeps into everything, it refuses to vanish. You lie back on a patch of cool stone near the pyramids, and for a moment time bends. The stars overhead are the same stars that watched Khufu lay his first blocks, the same that gleamed when Tutankhamun was buried in gold, the same that lit Cleopatra's last night. Thousands of years compress into one breath. Egypt lives in that breath. Historians still debate what ended Egypt's greatness. Was it foreign conquest, civil strife, corruption, or the slow weight of centuries? But here, feeling the desert wind brush across your skin, the answer doesn't matter. Civilizations fall the way people do, not in one moment, but in many small ones, layered until the shape is unrecognizable. And yet, Egypt endures, in the monuments that refuse to crumble, in the stories whispered across generations, in the language etched on papyrus, waiting patiently for curious hands millennia later. Though pharaohs have fallen, Egypt is not gone. It has simply changed, folded into memory, into legend, into every grain of sand. Your eyes grow heavy as you listen to the wind hum through ancient stone. The torches of Roman soldiers flicker in the distance. But here, near the great monuments, their glow feels small, temporary. The pyramids rise against the night, unbothered, guardians of silence. Your breathing slows, The laughter of markets, the clash of armies, the songs of temples, all blur into a soft murmur, fading. You let it wash over you like a lullaby, the story winding down, the edges softening. Egypt drifts into dreams, and so do you. The last image you carry is of the Nile under moonlight, silver and endless, flowing forever, carrying echoes of a lost kingdom into eternity.